Welcome to the Great Distraction.
Hello again, folks. This is The Great Distraction, and today the topic of discussion is poverty in America. My name is Ben. With me today are my co-host Thomas.
How's it going?
And Glenn.
Hello.
If this is your first time listening, welcome. We thank you for joining us. The Great Distraction is a podcast that focuses on a vast and random range of and a vast range of topics. I can't even talk today. And we hope that each episode leaves you with, if nothing else, a little something to ponder. Assuming I can get through the introduction that I've said how many times now?
You're doing good so far.
Golf clap.
Yep. That's pretty sad. Poverty in America is also sad. That's what we're here to discuss today. Let's see. First of all, my data sources, because, I'm going to start this off with a little bit of stats, because that stuff is kind of interesting.
Info.
Well, you have to lay a certain amount of foundation, I believe, to understand how the definitions of stuff like this works. And most of these that I found, if you're interested in doing more research on it, because there is a lot of any of these things that are government controlled or government monitored. Oh man, I really can't talk today. Usually they generate these rather lengthy and very well put together, pretty easy to read reports on an annual basis that show the status throughout the country, states, whatever, of a lot of these topics that we talk about. So that makes it both easy to research for us when we're doing these topics, but also if you guys are interested in, checking out the sources yourself, which again, if you're going to take anything at face value or not, you really should do your own research. But anyway,
Validate your data.
That's it. Validate it for me. Most of them come from the Department of Health and Human Services, HHS. And of course, they have a website, aspe.hss.gov. And these, most of the stats come from the 2019 Poverty Guidelines, if you're curious. Anyway, as a definition, poverty is a state of deprivation, lacking the usual or social acceptable amount of money or material possessions. I thought it was interesting when they said possessions.
That seems a little crazy too.
Yeah, I was like, wow, is that really how we define whether or not I'm in poverty? Because
absolutely.
Really? I could think, I would get first, the first time I thought about it, I thought, well, you make X number of dollars per year, you're not in poverty. I don't care if you go home and live in you have nothing in your apartment, literally nothing. But you made X number of dollars, you weren't in poverty. But apparently material possessions are somehow included in that.
I mean, think about basics. Cooking utensils, supplies.
True. Do you have an oven? Stove? Can you heat up food? Do you have a refrigerator to keep food cold?
And I think in California,
I guess those are material possessions.
Well, I think in California, if you don't have an iPhone,
you're... Yeah, I don't even want to get into that because, seriously, you do see some of my coworkers, they'll buy their kids the free, the $1,000 iPhone XS, whatever. I was like, are you
I must be in
me?
Poverty because I can't buy myself $1,000.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Can I be your
That's
child?
why I don't have a kid because I don't want to have to buy them $1,000
I just want one of them
gifts.
to adopt. Yeah, I just want one of them to adopt me. I don't want to. I want to be their kid.
Yeah, I'm still trying to find a rich family to take me in.
Good luck there, man.
Yep. So let's see. Some of the foundational stuff I was talking about. One of the first things I thought was interesting because right off the bat, okay, we're going to start looking at stats. They're going to start giving us stats, whatever. What are these stats based on? Or how are they measured? There's actually two forms of measurement that are the two most common in this country, and by which they measure levels of poverty it applies nationwide as well as down to the states. So it's kind of the whole system. The whole country uses the same type of system, depending on which system they're using. The most common form of measurement are called poverty thresholds, and they're put together by the United States Census Bureau. So every 10 years we take our national census, nationwide census, and then from that all those results are compiled. Which, as a matter of fact, we've got coming up in next year, right?
I believe so.
2020, yeah. Do you recall what time of year that actually comes out? I can never remember. It's
I don't know, but in 2000 I was actually a volunteer for the census.
Really? Were you one of those guys that went door to door, getting you knocking on people? Hey, you haven't turned in your census.
I did, yeah. It was.
Are people mean? I did not know you did that. I've always been curious about that job. How are people to you about that?
I'd say it's 50-50.
Really?
Some people are like, get off my lawn. And then
Wow.
other people are like, what is it? Oh, yeah.
What is it?
They're super
How old
talkative. Some
are you?
people are super talkative and you want to leave.
Wow, yeah.
But that happens to me all the time anyway.
What state did you do that in?
Ohio.
Ohio?
Yeah, I was in Cleveland for a little while, and I was kind of bouncing around after touring, and it was right before I moved back to Indianapolis, and somebody was like, I'm working at the census thing, and it paid, and we just walked around neighborhoods with these boards, and it was like a questionnaire that you took with you, and you knocked, and they gave you a region, hey, you can go to this neighborhood or whatever, and I'd say it was 50-50. A lot of people, like I said, a lot of people were totally cool with it. But
Was it actually the questions that are asked in the census, or was it a different questionnaire?
No, well, I don't really know which one was which, because they gave us, they were like, here's what we want you to, the questions we want you to ask, and I don't know if that was directly the exact.
And you're only going to the
census thing or
people that
whatever.
that haven't turned in their census, right? It's like a list of people who haven't mailed.
No,
their...
we kind of went into a neighborhood, and they were just like, yeah, this is your neighborhood kind of thing, and I walked around.
See, I always assumed those people went through, and it could be a different team that does this. I always assumed that if you didn't do the census survey and then send it back in, then they came after you because you have to do it.
Oh, no,
So that's what I didn't know. So there may be a
This
different.
isn't like jury duty.
No, well, there may be a different team that does do that because I could have swore I heard that is something that they'll go door to door and like, hey, sorry, we didn't receive a census
they
from
might.
you.
Yeah, I didn't
Can
do
you
that.
either figure it out and send it in, or take this one right now? So you were like a different type of survey.
Yeah, we went into like a certain area that we were, surveying or whatever you want to call it.
That's,
and
that's
yeah,
interesting. You're like like the Mormons, dude, going door to door.
I felt like it.
Wow, dude, that's crazy. Okay, so where were we? The poverty thresholds there. They represent a federal government estimate of the point below which a household of a given size has pre-tax cash income insufficient to meet minimal food and other basic needs. So see, this one doesn't say anything about material possessions, just the ability to meet minimal food, they even say minimal food, and basic needs. And apparently, of those, there are 48 possible poverty thresholds that a family can be assigned to, and which vary based on family size and the age of its members. I actually couldn't find a list of these 48 levels that I understood. This was really, really weird the way they seemed
So
to
that's
break
like
it down.
is that like a tier that they use to distribute like WIC or welfare in general or something? Maybe.
As far as how it was used was not included on there.
Okay.
I'm sure that it is used that way by other entities that provide such types
That's what I
of
would think,
assistance.
yeah.
And it did look like it was tiered with levels in the tiers. Because 48 slots, 48 levels, that's like a lot, dude. I mean, how do you, I couldn't figure out how it was broken down. It did not seem to be broken down in an intuitive manner to me. But then remember, this is government, so if it's got to be confused to keep a lot of people employed.
Exactly.
They had one large group of workers for every 48 levels, yes. But anyway, yeah, I couldn't make heads or tails of that really, other than that was a description that I found for it, right? It was kind of like, didn't make sense. The other unit of measurement, which we'll get to in a second, made a lot more sense to me. And if a family's total income before taxes is below that poverty threshold, the family is in poverty, obviously, and all of its members. Oh, here's the reason I wanted to quote this part. And all members of that family have the same poverty status. So if you as a whole, your family as a whole is listed as poverty, everyone in it is poverty as well, which I don't know. I guess because like if one individual was the breadwinner and made let's say $1,000 less than the poverty level all by themselves, I mean if they were an individual they wouldn't be in poverty, but then they're kind of I don't want to say.
Well, if they have 4 dependents,
Yeah, I guess that does make sense. It
wife,
just
3 kids, kind of thing.
yeah. So I guess if you're under the age of 18 and your dad is in poverty, your whole family's in poverty, you too are in poverty. It's like dang, guilty by association, I guess. And the same applies for a single individual. If you don't have a family, if you're below the poverty level, you're in poverty, period. I loved that. State the obvious there.
Right.
But
One more time.
Can I explain that the same way, but only differently?
Just for the record, man.
Just for the record.
Same way,
Yeah.
different, but with no similarities.
Okay, so the other unit of measurement is called the Poverty Guidelines. And these are issued annually by the Federal Registrar by the Department of Health and Human Services. Again, we come back to those guys. And the main takeaway from this is that the key differences are poverty thresholds are used for calculating all of the official poverty population statistics. For instance, figures on the numbers of Americans in poverty each year. Poverty guidelines are a simplified version of the federal poverty thresholds used for administrative purposes. For instance, determining financial eligibility for certain federal programs, any type of government assistance program, stuff like that. So one's for statistics and one's for actually helping you. Now, figuring out which one you benefit more from, I don't know. That's where it gets real sticky, taking into closer consideration the differences between the two and where an individual sits in it. I didn't even get into that. That got real complicated real fast. Current poverty guidelines are as follows, and these are from 2019, and these have to do with the number of persons in a household nationwide, except for in Alaska and Hawaii, because those guys have a totally different range, level. So one in the household is $12,490 a year, 2 is $16,900, 3 is $21,300, and 4 people in a household is $25,750 a year. If you're below that, you are in poverty or classified as in poverty. And that seems to change very, very frequently, those levels. Because those numbers I pulled, I believe, were from February 1st, 2019. And the fact that they included a date like that makes me think, wow, how often are you guys updating these levels? And yeah, I mean, where are you getting that much new data, that accurate, that frequently that you can continue to update? That I could not answer. The government, there's documents and articles that those government entities put out on their websites. You really have to pour into some of that stuff to find out where they extract a lot of this data from. Aside from that, a few quick facts that I thought were kind of cool. The state with the lowest and highest poverty levels, and that's the number of people living below poverty level. The lowest is New Hampshire. Apparently, they've been the lowest for a long time. 7.7% as of 2017 live below the poverty level. 7.7. The highest is Mississippi. And apparently, Mississippi, I did not know this about Mississippi. I'm like pretty much only been a West Coast boy my entire life, but Mississippi is known, unfortunately for them, because I feel bad saying this, but I found statistics
they're
that show
definitely
this.
known for poverty, and the South is
They
definitely
are known for the
poverty.
worst of everything. Like if there's a number to be, as a matter of fact, there's actually a saying, and this is on the wiki page for poverty in America. There is actually a saying that goes, and apparently is bigger in the South. Thank God for Mississippi, because no matter how bad your state looks with its stats, Mississippi is always worse. That's pretty sad, dude. I did not know this about Mississippi. I've never been there, never had a desire to go there, but their poverty level is the highest in the country, has been for a long, long time.
What's the number? Drum roll, please.
19.8%
19%?
as of 2017.
Oh, my God. That's what?
And that's actually
20% of...
I'll get to a little more here, but that's actually down low.
Wow.
For that's where it was 10 years ago. So we had a spike in the middle, the economic, downfall we had, rose poverty levels all across the board, and now we're finally back to where we were actually before 10 years ago. But yeah, California, for those of us that are in California listening, 11.2 as of 2017. So I guess kind of in between, whatever. National poverty level is 13.7.
That's the national average?
That's the national. All that's for 2017. And across the board, nearly all the states are back to where they were before 10 years ago, so over a decade
So before
ago.
the recession?
Yeah,
basically?
pretty much, because that puts us back at 2007, and it looked like the last time we were this low was like 2004 or something like that. Yeah, it didn't have clear numbers on the particular graph that I was looking at, and I didn't drill down any further, but you could see the huge spike in the middle, and then we're on our way back down.
Wow.
Yeah. So Thomas has a lot of history that he pulled up that I thought was great.
Well, so me being the weird history buff, so I think when we talk about history in America, or poverty in America,
The history of poverty.
history of poverty in America, I don't even know what we're talking about this week.
Yeah, you got to excuse us for a second there, guys. We're actually recording a new spot today, and it's a little, I don't know, disorientating, I think.
There's a lot more beer here.
Yeah, there's more beer. It's kind of a different vibe, different sound. So we're trying something different out here, and I think it's throwing us off a little bit here.
I'm a little off my game.
Yeah, we'll work through it.
But so, going back to the history thing, when we talk about history of poverty in America, we have to establish some things that kind of make things sort of in perspective. And if anybody's out there really is into reading, there's an author named Thomas Sowell, African American. He's an amazing person. He's written probably 60 books in his life, and a lot of them cover poverty, wealth, just a crazy array of cool and interesting things. But when we talk about the poverty in America, we have to remember that 100 years ago, let's take it to Lincoln era, 1865. In 1865, Lincoln, after the slaves were freed, there was what was ended up being called Special Field Order 15, something like that. What it was there was a meeting with Lincoln and a bunch of Southern African American leaders, and when the slaves were freed, that they were reaching out. Lincoln was very known for reaching out against most of the other Republicans in his party because he was a Republican. They reached out to the black community and said, "What can we do? What as moving forward as a new America, what can we do to help you progress, to establish yourself and move forward?" Because if you look at history and all these people are slaves, now they're not slaves anymore. Well, they have nothing. They're complete poor. So they're starting from scratch. So one of the things that they said was, we want land. So Lincoln enacted what was actually called the Sherman Field Order number 15. And what that was is in the South, a lot of land was confiscated from slave owners and plantation owners, and to the extent, I think it was about 400,000 acres. And what was happening was they were going to redistribute those in 40-acre plots, so that newly freed slaves could have some way of starting a life in New America and become tax-paying regular citizens to give them a boost to bring back in. So that was signed in 1965, I believe January 16th, 1965, by President Lincoln. Well, if most of you know some history, in 1965, something else happened. Lincoln was shot. So Andrew Jackson took over, and Andrew Jackson was opposed to that, which many white politicians were at that time, giving slaves any sort of foothold in becoming regular citizens of America, because as they were slaves, there was obviously control. And we have to remember, too, that in that era when there was slavery, if you took the value of the slave trade in today's market, it was about $3 billion. Wow. So the act of selling slaves, using slaves, the way industries, from tobacco industries, all these other cotton and other things, that was their industry, their labor industry. It was a whole nother industry, and it was worth a lot of money. Yeah, I bet. So these people were only valuable as workers. So when they became free, one of the things that the North was trying to do to sort of, and a lot of people believe it was to sort of get back at the Southern plantation owners and stuff that were very pro-slavery, was they confiscated all this land to give it to these Africans that were they were newfound freedom in America, and they wanted them to prosper and do so. So they got these 40-acre lots. So Lincoln gets shot. Andrew Jackson comes in. He takes over president for like 4 months or whatever during that time. And the first thing that he did was revoke that. So a lot of African Americans who had moved in earlier in the year onto these properties of land in the South were immediately kicked out of the land. So now you had an enormous population that had no job, nowhere to go, nowhere to live, a president that was willing to try to help them out, and now they were just kicked out to nowhere. So poverty in America really started around 1865, because in that era, we didn't really have a lot of minorities in America. We had white Americans that were basically taking land from the Indians, the natives, and we had the African slaves. So all of a sudden now you have an establishment of slaves, newly freed slaves who had no jobs, had no place to live. So that was where ghettos and poverty, a lot of that stuff started. So it was a really hard battle for African Americans to move forward from that. So you have to remember that, in certain places, especially in America, we've had this sort of control, and financial control is one of those things. We talk about a lot on the show where, modern day slavery is credit or banking and a lot of other things that we
bred by consumerism, right?
Yeah, and so when we talk about poverty in America, for me, I think we have to go back and understand where some of these things come from. And so for a very long period of time, this is over 100 years later. That's 100 years. So if you go back 130 years in American history, you have newly freed slaves who owned nothing, who had no jobs, had nowhere to go. They had no ways to pay for anything, to feed themselves, feed their families. They had nothing.
Yeah, nobody would give them a job either.
Nobody's giving it. You're free, but you're here.
Yeah.
So there was this huge battle, but that was really the source and start of real poverty in North America or the United States. And that's only been 40 years or so, 50 years. So it's been a real hard battle from them. So the poverty that we're seeing today is directly a part of that, those events happening. Had that not been overturned, had Lincoln not been shot, we'd probably be looking at a very different America, because you're talking thousands of recently freed slaves who would have started out on 40-acre plots, which is what this country started out on. You think about all the times in history where we're trying to repopulate the country, or we get the Louisiana Purchase, or we get California or whatever, and we say, okay, we've got all this land. And several times during American history, they said, okay, everybody go find a spot. Yeah. That's your new land.
Let's divvy it up.
We'll divvy it up. And it was given away free, but it was only given away to white people.
Yeah.
And so the poverty in America really started as a black event, and that we've really been harshly trying to crawl out of. And so there's always been this play of power in America, and poverty has been one of those. If you don't have any money, you can't fight against anything. If you don't have a job, you don't have all these things, you don't have the resources to stand up and fight or have a battle in any way, you're going to be poor. And that continued all the way through the 19th century. And even my mom grew up in Southern California, and in the 60s, when she was graduating, she told me stories about how it was an unspoken thing for a lot of people in places like San Fernando, if in the white neighborhoods, if they were going to sell their homes, they did not sell it to blacks. So again, it was another source of control. So you're pushing a population of people inside your own community to have to live in a certain area because they have no choice. They can't better themselves. And if you look at poverty and you look at wealth in America, one thing we have to remember is that the average family in America derives their wealth from land ownership, owning a house. Most people in America, about 2/3 of your wealth, what you would consider your wealth, is equity in your home, because you can own a home. So as of about 2010, the average white American, that value was about $170,000. For the African American family, it was about $17,000.
Wow.
So there's been this huge wealth gap forever, and it's continuing to grow. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer as our population goes up. And so as this story unfolds, even as we move forward, there's still what was happening. Okay, so slaves are free. We don't want to give people this. We don't give. There's all these ways of holding and controlling. Poverty has been the main source of control in America for many, many years. So during FDR's presidency, he did this thing that was called the New Deal. I don't know if you guys know much about history, but the New Deal happened
Definitely
from about
heard of that
1933 to 1936. And it also opened up the ability to allow more Americans access to bank loans, to buy land, to buy property, which was a non-discriminatory plan. So you could be from anywhere. You're an American citizen now. It doesn't matter if you're white, black, Hispanic, whatever. You have the same rights. And before that, you really didn't. Banks could say, no, we're not going to give you a loan because you're black. And that happened all the way up until the New Deal in the 1930s. So poverty was growing. So you look at about 1865 to about 1930s, there's a dramatic amount of time where people were fighting with nothing, and poverty really started to set into America and become an actual issue. So when the New Deal happened, the president signed this in, and so, okay, we have to make it a law. It's such a bad deal for humans in this country to be held back that we have to make a law that says everyone should be allowed to apply for a loan for a home. That's pretty crappy in general. So when this happened, when the banks decided, okay, well, the federal government's going to tell us we're going to do this, okay, we'll give them loans, but we're going to give them subprime loans. And in the banking system, as any of us, and we've talked about this several times on the show, these institutions have been holding people down forever with credit, subprime loans, all these sort of things. It's really expensive to be poor in America.
Yeah.
If you don't have a checking account, which I don't understand why anyone doesn't have a checking account because they're virtually free.
Yeah.
But, I had a friend in Indiana who owned check cashing places. And I don't want to say it to be mean, but they owned them in the ghettos.
Oh, yeah. Those things only exist in the lower income areas.
Yeah.
I mean, you could tell anywhere you are.
Yeah. But if you work for somebody and you make a $200 check and now you got to give $35 just to cash it.
Yeah, no joke. They're such a ripoff, too. I've looked into that just out of curiosity.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable percentages they take.
Yeah, and to be poor in America is very expensive. So what happened and even into the 60s and even into the 80s, when African Americans would go to buy property, there were these things called the red districts. And this is absolutely true, and you can look it up in a lot of different ways. Maps for most major metropolitan cities had red districts. Red districts were considered low-income areas where banks and any sort of financial institutions would not give good loans to. They were considered subprime loan areas, and they were usually black neighborhoods or minority neighborhoods. So our own financial system has from the beginning been controlled to hold people in a poverty level, discriminatory system to hold them down. So poverty in America was a plan. And the fact that I feel like in the modern 21st century that we are finally starting to maybe break some boundaries and really get out of this, I see it going in a positive direction. Every time I see an African American get elected into an official place or something, I'm happy about it because I feel like there should be more of a rounded group of people running this country.
A representation
of the actual people, and that's slowly starting to happen. But we're still fighting this system that has been in place for 150 years.
Yeah. Well, it's deeply embedded in what we are, in the material of this country. It's like it's really hard to pull that crap out. I mean, you're literally trying to pull out single threads out of an entire cloth. I mean, it's hard to undo.
It's hard to undo. And there's lots of stories, and I'm not big into politics because I don't really like politicians. We
don't like politics around.
But there is a politician who's getting some airplay nowadays, and I can't remember what his first name is. African American. His last name is Booker, I think, something like that. But if you're interested in some of these stories, you should look up this guy because in one of it was either a documentary or something else I saw that he talks a little bit about his family, and his father back in, I think it was the 60s, tried to buy a house in a nice neighborhood, which would have been a white neighborhood at the time, and he was turned down. And so when he would go to buy the house, the real estate agent would say, "Oh, it's already sold," or "It's in escrow," or something just to and then some of them would be very blunt and say, well, you don't want to live here. Your people aren't here. You're not welcome here. All
your
these things.
People don't live here.
There's a lot of backlash from suburban whites about blacks moving into their neighborhoods.
They were shunned away. There goes the neighborhood, right?
There goes the neighborhood. So what this guy did is he teamed up with some African American groups that were trying to help the African American communities. They hired a white guy to go in and bid on these houses, and he bid on the house that he was trying to buy and got the house. And he told the real estate agent that he was doing it for a client. So they didn't ask any questions. I'm doing a white guy doing business with a white man for a client. Never even thought to ask, is your client white? So when the day the escrow, everything went through and the house was bought and everything goes through the bank, and he goes to get the key from the realtor, he shows up and it's this guy's dad, and he's black. So there's a huge fight breaks out, and he fights with this other guy, and there's a fist fight breaks out and all this stuff, and the cops are calling this crazy stuff. A physical fight went down.
Awesome.
And then that was one of the things. But his father, because he was able to buy property in a decent neighborhood, he had a good job, he had a college degree, because he was able to, and he had to almost figure out a scam to buy property in a good neighborhood, he was able to establish wealth or basic commonwealth like most Americans. If you think about the American dream, home ownership is a giant part of this. If you want to hold people down, don't let them be a part of the dream. So he was able to establish credit because he had a home. He could build equity in the home. He was able to buy a second house and to build up money that he eventually ended up sending his son to a good college for. And this now his son's in politics, which I don't think is a good decision, but whatever.
Well, there's the representation you were talking about getting into.
Exactly,
right?
But that's the thing. And so we live in a country that, not only are there a lot of determining factors of why we have poor or poverty in our own country, it was by design and design. And we've had this problem for many, many years. I feel like we're starting to dig our way out of it, but you have to think about this thing, and you can't, just like when we talk about homeless people, some people drive by a homeless person and go, "Oh, that piece of crap, get a job." That's a pretty crappy way to think about it. And so when you think about that, when you think about people who are in poverty in America, you can't just say, "Oh, they're stupid, they're uneducated." Well, a lot of them never had a choice. And I guess that's one of the biggest problems that we face moving forward in America is poverty is always going to be something as long as there's someone who has something to gain by keeping people poor.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The minute they found a way to make money off of keeping people in a certain condition,
and you notice it always changes too. And we talked about this before, where well now you can't do this to keep people down. Well, what's the next thing we can do? And most banks are probably the guiltiest person involved in all this thing. So now we got subprime loans, we got high interest rates. Oh, you're a minority, you live in this neighborhood. Well, your credit card, we'll give you a credit card, but it's going to be 32%.
That's right.
Or some sort of crap like that.
And so I don't want to take it off topic of this because this is good stuff. But that whole turning people into consumers, period, consumerism in general, is definitely a way of controlling people. And there have been some, you can do your own research and try and find out who it is or who said what, but there have been some very large and influential leaders in this entity, both from the private aspect and from the government aspect, that have acknowledged that in private or in public, that the new way to control the sheep is to let them go out and chase every stupid thing they can buy and remain distracted. And we can control the things that they aren't worried about anymore because they're so concerned with what the Kardashians are doing,
Right.
or the latest Snapchat filter,
Yeah.
or the latest phone that they've got to go chase, that
Yeah.
they're too stupid to figure out any of the rest of the stuff
Yeah,
that's,
and you throw
that's
that
going on.
you throw that consumerism into it, and you sell this idea that you have to have this, you have to have that. Well, if the average person is just barely getting by, or maybe they're just past the poverty level, and they see all this in the advertisement and the peer pressure to have an iPhone or to have all these crazy things, and so now they fall into it because they don't want to be left behind. Nobody wants to be left behind.
No,
nobody. So you're willing to basically sacrifice being in a massive amount of debt to try to be part of the sheeple.
Yeah, which massively affects your poverty level.
Absolutely, because you can never climb out of it. I mean, I've got a credit card I use for my business right now that's, a few $1,000s, but because I use it all the time, and every time I turn around, I'm like, Jesus Christ, how does this keep going up? It's just, you can't, once, credits are established, and especially credit cards, to get you hooked and get you in there, and then make it impossible for you to pay these things off. I mean, even if you have a good credit score, you're still paying a high rate. I have a bank card with good credit, and I'm still paying a high rate.
And on top of that, every time you run it up towards the max, they go ahead and boost that max for you. Oh, you need a higher limit? No problem, dude. We'll keep that rising.
Oh,
for you.
$5,000 wasn't
Oh,
enough? How
yeah,
about
just-
$6,500?
Yeah, just keep adding a little more. Yeah, it's completely a trap.
Yeah, and I think that's the sad part about the way that our consumerism is set up, and I'm like, it's when you start talking about capitalism in America, it's a hard argument to have because you got to say, well, we have to have the freedom to run businesses and to sell things and do things, and capitalism isn't really a bad idea, but we're also selling it to people who can't afford it through products and services that are going to keep them financially strapped.
It really is a vicious cycle, right? Because you can't blame the manufacturer of said widget, for making it and selling it to the people. It's
Absolutely.
it's not their fault that the person is killing themselves or putting themselves in massive debt to purchase said widget. You can't really blame the credit companies, and this is the part that they love, right? Because they're not forcing anyone to take out a credit card and go buy this entity, this widget that's may be it overpriced or whatever, but it's going to put this person in debt. So it just kind of goes back and forth, and nobody really knows there's nobody really to take the blame for it. But nevertheless, as it continues snowballing, we all get worse and worse and worse into it. And these entities that provide the widget or provide you the money at a fee, a percentage fee or whatever, both benefit from it. So
Yeah. And you're also looking at a situation too where you're constantly being removed funding for things like public school and stuff like that because we need more money for military.
We need
or
a
this or
wall.
whatever. We need a wall, whatever it is. So let's just have the lowest SAT scores on the planet as long as these people sign up for credit cards.
this stuff keeps making me think of things that I really want to go off topic and talk about something else. But the latest thing, did you hear about Trump's Space Force?
Oh, I remember.
So what is this?
The sixth he's created, and as far as I
Sixth
understand,
branch of the
sixth
military.
branch of the military is the Star Wars Space Force. I think he did 2 or 3 billion. I'm sorry, I don't have the facts, guys. You're going to have to go look at this. Look at the stuff if you want to know. Just Google Trump's Space Force, and I believe it's 2 or 3 billion put into this new entity that is like you said, a sixth branch of the military, and it's literally to create defensive weaponry and another new branch for a space war, like Star Wars type stuff.
To defend ourselves from
Space
alien
attack. Or space
attacks.
attack.
So the crazy right-wing Christians like Mike Pence who don't believe in any science all of a sudden believe in aliens, and we need to have a space force.
Dude, I'm all for this.
Okay, and I didn't see. I did very limited looking into this, but I didn't see anything that said anything about extraterrestrial or alien threats. What I do assume right off the bat is it may be putting things into space to protect us from warfare from other countries coming via space.
Sure.
I.e., they launch a rocket off into space, it circles around the moon and comes back down on us, right? Okay, maybe. However, 2 or 3 billion to start, and as I understood it, because it originally they were talking about making it an extension of the Air Force. Now
that's what
he
I heard,
decided to make it its own branch. And when they were considering making an extension of the Air Force had come back with, and again, check these numbers, guys. The Air Force had come back with 11 billion as the amount of money they needed to get this off the ground, pun intended. And then now that he's spun it into its own division or branch or whatever, I imagine that estimate's got to be still somewhat close to 11 billion. But Yeah, he's got
Yeah.
a few billion.
But
at
can
least
you
put into it.
imagine if we just if somebody that was in some sort of political power just said, you know what, we should invest in our people.
Yeah.
We should believe in our people. And,
Where's the money there?
well? Here's the
War makes money,
well,
right?
War
So-
makes money, and I agree, Glenn. That's exactly what happens. But the sad part is, if you invest in your own people, the future becomes a little bit easier because people are solving problems, people are figuring things out. You have a
look at some of the
higher education. Look at a lot of European countries.
Or look at some of the countries that were like next to third world, and they sat there and educated all of their kids, like India. Dude, India is taking over. They were like really, really not good conditions,
well,
right?
isn't it? What country is it? Not Brazil. It's somewhere in South America. Damn, I wish I could remember it now. If you guys know who Neil Grossi is, right?
Neil deGrasse Tyson?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tyson. Sorry, I always get his
deGrasse
name
Tyson.
wrong.
Yeah, I know. Me too.
So he was talking. I think it's Peru. Anyway, there's a country in South America that has in the last 10 years has become the leader in aerospace engineering and technology, just out of nowhere. One of the reasons is because they have spent the last 20 or 30 years investing in their education programs and educating their people. And
it's easy to do that when you
It's
are
super
a
easy to do
poorer country, especially.
well, it's easy to do it when you're the richest country in the world, too.
Well, yeah, but it would be hard for our country to focus on something like that because we have so many great fucking distractions. I mean, how are you going to tear these kids away from Fortnite? Or which Thomas is like, what?
Fortnite.
Anybody out there who knows, is associated with, or has a child that's under the age of 13, 14 knows exactly what I'm talking about. The crack that is for kids that is Fortnite. And if it wasn't that, it was Minecraft or whatever. How are you going to tear them away from these TV shows, movies, video games? And I mean, they hate school as it is.
Well-
Did you love going to school?
Well, I didn't love going to school, but I went to a public school in
too.
Indianapolis, a really crappy public school, and I hated it because it sucked. I mean, and that's the actual reality of it. I mean, when I was in
I
high
don't think
school,
there was any kid in any elementary school.
I'm saying this as an adult looking back at it. It was really a screwed up system that didn't educate people. It didn't really invest.
No, it was
in
just like
people.
babysitting and like, here's some homework.
Pretty much, yeah. And-
that's all
and-
my school was too.
Right, and that's the sad part because if we invested in our education, especially in the poverty levels, we keep cutting all this funding for
You mean the lower income areas?
lower income areas,
Yeah,
but we're removing funding for like arts and music and all these things. And everybody knows. If you don't know this by now, let me explain this to you. Cutting funding for arts and music, it destimulates a child's mind. Arts and music create imagination. And imagination in children is a developmental process that gives way to an adventurous adult who understands that anything is possible, that they can dream, they can imagine, and they can chase after things because they feel like they can accomplish stuff.
Innovation.
The
Innovation.
diversification of the mental portfolio.
So I don't
have to
understand.
have it.
I've never understood why we keep stripping so much money away from schools, and especially public schools. And we're in a poverty. But if you go back to the bigger argument, the bigger conversation we're having, there's an exact reason why we're doing that. Because the dumber people are, the less they'll question anything.
Keep the sheeple.
Absolutely. So the dumber everybody is, the less we spend, the more we jank out of the fucking education system, the less smarter people are, the less they're going to challenge the people who are in power. I mean, the fact that more people aren't challenging the idiots that are in power in this country now blows my mind.
It is really
But they're not
ridiculous.
going to because they're too busy playing, their app game of the week.
Yeah, and all they can handle is two parties, right? And I don't even know why we still have two parties. It kills me.
It's so that people will think that they have a choice.
Uh,
That's the only reason we have two parties.
Yeah, to
an
put all the
illusion.
funnel all the people it is an illusion to funnel all the people into two parties of representation. I mean, I know there are other options,
Yeah, but the
no,
leaders are financed by the same organizations. They're the same
Right.
it's the
fucking
same thing. That's
Yeah.
the worst part.
Yeah. One of the only things I've ever heard about an argument in politics is like every politician should have to wear stickers or badges, just like race car drivers, about who their sponsors are.
Oh,
Jeez,
yeah.
dude,
I
there
would
would be
love
so
to
much
see that.
cross-platform in that.
That
I
would
mean,
be
You'd see Trump up. You'd see Trump up
amazing.
there. He'd look like a clown with all what he does already, but he'd have all these like stickers on him. And but all presidents and all politicians like it. And if you think that I'm picking on Trump, you're right. But the thing is, they're all assholes and they're all scumbags, and they don't care about you.
No.
If you're not a billionaire in their billionaire club, stop voting for these people. We should have a choice called none of the above. And if you believe in reinvesting in your community, start at a local level. We can all do things all the time to help out. And when it comes to poverty, sometimes poverty is just a lack of information, a lack of people trying. If no one learns something and no one's ever given the opportunity to understand something, they're never going to know it. They're never going to know how to do anything. And that's one of the sources of poverty is lack of education.
Dude, this reminds me of the emotions episode that we did not too long ago, right?
Yeah.
If nobody ever, and I tried to emphasize this point with proving that you could change how you feel about certain given situations, right? And my basis for that was if nobody ever told you that it was possible to change the way you feel about a certain thing or affect your emotions and how the reaction that you have each time. You never knew that there was even you could do that, right? It's like the same thing. It's the same thing, and it's been proven time and time again, especially in low-income areas. If nobody goes to these people and educates them that they are capable of doing something more with themselves, then they never realize that there's any different lifestyle that they could possibly have. This is what my dad did. This is what my brother did, my older sister, whatever. And you just keep regurgitating the same vicious cycle of garbage over and over again because nobody helps them out of it. That's the only way and the only reason that everybody else who did get out of it, that's how they did it. Because somebody in their good schools or their whatever.
Gotta disagree with that.
Oh my gosh. Okay, what do you got? Give it to me. Lay it down. Lay it down.
Oh, just the blanket statement to say that this is the only way that somebody can achieve something, I feel like that's a little narrow-sighted, man. I mean, there are people that have self-educated. They've gone and just individuals that are well-driven, not necessarily...
Yeah, but how do you self-educate if you don't learn how to learn? In order to self-educate, somebody has to at least give you the seed that says you can go out there and learn this yourself. I mean, it's kind of a confidence thing. It's kind of a direction thing. It's kind of and I mean, I know at our age, yes, anybody can, you should know that by now that you can teach yourself something. But imagine when you're 6 years old.
If there was something that I was interested in, I pursued it.
What if you were never even exposed to something that you were interested in? If you're in a poor area, I mean, if you're...
Can you walk into a library?
If they have libraries in really low-income areas, I don't know.
A lot of those are getting shut down.
Maybe. I mean, the internet's taken over that. And if you're given a phone that's attached to the internet with all the world's answers, right at your fingertips, but all you ever look for is Fortnite videos and rap videos.
That's a personal choice there.
Yeah, but I mean, when you're really young, you have to be shown things in order to
I think there does need to be guidance, though. And that's the one thing I think about education is it gives some guidance to cause when I was a little kid, I was in, and I think Glenn and I think all of us at this table are probably in the same category. Even when we were really young, we were adventurous thinkers and we were interested in things and we sought out information. When I was a kid before the internet and all that stuff, I would go to libraries and look at things and stuff. But I was willing to do that. I was willing to put the effort in it. But I also grew up in a family where my dad was an engineer. Yeah, my mom was a very smart person.
That makes a huge difference. The exposure.
And this is the exposure. And for me, I think that argument about the poverty level on things is a lot of these kids, and I try to hire kids all the time at the shop, sometimes just a friend of a friend or something like that. And it's amazing to me how much some people are not exposed to. And I've said this over and over in my life. I feel like the reason I struggle as much as I did is because I never had any exposure to anybody who had any real guidance towards financial stability in my life. No one ever taught me how to use money. No one ever taught. I was just lucky that my mom worked her ass off and she was poor and she held on every penny. Yeah. We counted change to go to the grocery store, and I learned at an early age that every single penny counts. It's money. So what is a penny? 100 of them make $1.
Yeah, my dad tried telling me that.
That was the theory that I grew up in. But when we talked about the poverty thing, I feel like a lot of people, especially a lot of kids, if they don't have the exposure, and we can admit that there's a lot of people having kids that shouldn't be having kids. There's a lot of huge population shouldn't be going on, but just because you're born doesn't mean you're a problem. Maybe you were born because of a problem, or maybe you grew up in a neighborhood where there really wasn't a lot of guidance or anything for you, but that sucks. And we, as one of the richest countries in the world, should be able to look at our children who are our future and say, hey, maybe we don't need space program. Maybe we need an extra, bump in our education system.
Hey, man, all those funds that he wants to get for that wall, pour that back into education.
Oh, dude.
I pour 10%. Here's my thing.
Or all of it, but yeah.
But on that same note, we need to look at our education system.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I think is part of the poverty problem,
training people to be worker bees.
I wonder, too, though, if
not critical thinkers.
If we had a leadership that flipped around and said, we're going to put $5 billion into our education system this year instead of a wall, and if you allotted that much money at such a high level, I think maybe the scrutiny and the granular deconstruction of the educational system would be a next obvious thing, because typically they don't throw, well, I mean, they do, but there's got to be a lot of research in how to spend a huge allotment of money like that. And you would hope that
Absolutely.
you would hope that once the magnifier goes over that area of expenditure that they've just created, when they decide to dump all this money in there, would cause them to really granularly look into how best to utilize that money. Kind of like they're building a wall, where they're supposedly really granularly looking at how do we build a good wall and where do we put it, and where does it flow along the country line. The border. That's what I meant to say. The border. It's like, so ideally, if somebody did allot a large sum of money to education, hopefully they would begin picking apart and let's really just deconstruct this and figure out where we can improve upon it. I don't know. That would be, I would hope.
Well, one of the things I thought, especially with the legalization of marijuana, we're collecting all those taxes, and I don't know if any guys buy weed, but I do. And if you buy weed now, especially in places like California, there's a sales tax, and then there's a California cannabis tax. So there's two separate taxes being charged on there. So my thought is, when I look at industries like the marijuana industry, to me it seems like I've always felt like those are a group of people who care about other people. Hey, we started out as municipal. We want to help people feel better and do this thing. Well, why can't we allot 5% of those funds back into our public education?
I don't know why.
It's a whole new source of money. It's a new source of a pile of money.
I haven't
that
seen,
wouldn't affect any of the other programs that are already going on. This is new
right.
money. Why can't we
free
take
money, basically?
Why can't we take 5% of this new money and put it into our poverty level education?
Now, I don't stay up on the news, and I don't, really research that kind of stuff or politics that much. However, I haven't heard, and usually I hear things through the grapevine, through other people, whatever, so to speak, not the real grapevine, but anyway, about things like this, right? I have not heard anything, and I'm asking you two if you've heard anything, with respect to what is the additional income from those marijuana taxes going to. Nobody's promised anything.
It's going to politicians.
Well, I mean, yeah, we agree with that, but or it's going in the general fund for the state of California. But what are they, or the state that it's going to? I mean, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm with you. What is that money doing?
Yeah, and I'm blown away that I mean, on our ballot, and again, sorry guys, we can only kind of speak for California. I've never lived anywhere else, and definitely never paid attention to politics really in any other states. But I'm assuming it's pretty close to how California works too. With when we pass a bill that enacts a new gas tax. That was a big one for us right now. We just got a huge lot of money in a gas tax increase. That's going to fund a whole bunch of stuff for our roadways and yada, yada, yada. But when they increase this tax, it's something that we vote on, and then they tell us, I mean, who knows if it's true or not. Let's eliminate the BS, right? I don't know we don't know where it's really going. But nevertheless, they at least tell us this is the plan for what we're going to do with the money. Here's the amount of money we're expected to collect. Here's the usage case for it, where it's going to apply, yada, yada, yada. We heard all kinds of stuff moving forward about the recreational legalization of marijuana and the dispensary control, and a little bit about how it's going to react for like DUIs and under the influence, whatever. But nothing about where the additional taxed money was
allocating the funds.
Yeah, where those funds were going to be allocated. I didn't even hear, and maybe they did put it out there. I didn't even hear how much the tax was going to be. I didn't hear it until I started hearing from people like Thomas just said, who were going in there and buying. And came out saying, "Oh man, they charged me additional 10%," or I can't remember what it is now.
Well, I was in Joshua Tree, and I went to a dispensary, and I bought $60 worth of cannabis, and my bill was right around $82. So it was almost $20 of extra taxes. There is the regular taxes, but what I'm saying is crazy. I don't know what the standard California tax rate is right now.
About 8%, depending on where you are.
It was $9.25 for weed. And then there was a cannabis tax on top of that.
So that's probably the county tax, the city tax, a tax for weed, for that type of sale of that product, and then an additional. So there, yeah.
But my point being is, again, here's all this giant pile of new money, which maybe we can call it a surplus of new money. Yeah. So what are we going to do with that money? And I think if we the voting citizens of the state voted on this, we should be able to see a transparent.
Yeah, they don't ask us to vote on so many laws, dude. It's just like we've had this conversation.
Well, we voted on legalizing marijuana.
Yeah, but that's all we voted on. They didn't ask us for the rest of it, right? We had the same conversation when we were talking about guns. They pass gun laws, and not to go off on a gun nut, rant. Thank you. But nevertheless, they pass laws that affect our right to own and firearms or whatever, and how we are able to own them, and we never vote on them. There's no voting that says. Yeah. So So when they allot these, okay, we're going to legalize marijuana. Well, what are you going to do with the money? Well, we're not asking you that.
Yeah.
So we don't have a choice.
You don't get to vote on that one.
No, they don't even ask you or tell you, and nothing. They don't have to. Yeah. It's just how they build these things in, I guess.
Which I think it sucks. But again, going back to the poverty thing, I think.
Sorry, we're getting off on the.
Yeah, I think in my opinion, my belief that we as Americans should be investing in our future. We should be investing in our children. We should have a lot more influence on trying to be positive role models in what we do. And if we have a large percentage of people in our country who are already at poverty level, the powers that be never want anybody else to be smart enough to challenge them. And that's what's gone on in white America for hundreds of years now. But this isn't white America anymore. This is 21st century world. And if you're one of those people who thinks things like we need to take our country back, and all this, if you're not an native Indian, don't ever say that.
Make America great again.
Because first of all, you're just a lying piece of crap. And if you want to take your country back, find out where you're from and go there. Yeah. So leave the rest of us alone. We have decided as American citizens that we are going to be a diverse culture that is going to invest in ourselves, hopefully. And as we move forward and the pot gets thicker and thicker, the melting pot of America, which I think is fantastic. Sure. If you don't think it's fantastic, you should live on an island where there's only one person, I guess. But if you live in the real world, you have to understand that we are an evolving culture that's constantly changing, and new people come in with new ideas all the time. We should welcome those and use them to make us a better people.
Yeah.
And I don't understand
We're under
that.
refinement here.
I've never understand that. But when this all goes back to the poverty conversation, because poverty, as we've said before, is a means of control. Because the people who are in power don't want anybody to challenge them or take away from what they have. And so educating people, especially minorities in America, challenges the status quo. That's why I said before, I'm always so happy when someone outside of white Christian gets voted into something, because it represents the real world. Yep. This is the real world. I've lived in major cities all my life, and I'm honestly, as being a white person, I've been a minority in almost everywhere I've ever lived. Never had a problem with it, because I am open-minded and I believe in a diverse culture. And I don't know about you, but ethnic women are hot. Why would you want to kick them to the side? Come on, people.
The truth comes out. Okay, so I want to use that whole rant there as a segue into just to talk about a couple of things that, one of which we've already talked about kind of extensively, but things that are being done to try and continue this downturn of poverty levels. And, or at least that came to my mind when I was thinking, when I was looking around into what is being done. One of them was, and I'll throw these out there, see what you guys think about it. Maybe we can discuss a little bit on your feelings and and thoughts on this. How about raising the minimum wage?
No.
Now,
don't do it.
It's already been done. But
what's your argument on that, though? I mean, what is your point of view on that statement?
From a, I guess, perspective of a small business owner, trying to, provide a service and make money. If I have to pay my employees more, I've got to increase the price of my service in order to maintain my
margin, profit, whatever.
Yeah, right.
Your profit margin. Yeah.
So if I've got to charge more for my services, it's just, then whoever my customers are going to have to pay more for that. So that increases their costs. Their employees are going to have to. It's just a. I'm not explaining this well.
Well, so my retort to that is the cost of everything is going up.
True, but
and we are disproportionately increasing our income, but we are disproportionately increasing rent, the cost of gas, the cost of vehicles. Everything that we buy is going up and up and up, except people's income.
So why not put a price cap on these things?
But as a small business owner, do you want the government to come in and say, Glenn, you can't charge that much for that service anymore?
If it means that I don't have to pay my employee as much and I can maintain a private line, I think that's a better way to go about it. Or readjust our taxes.
Well, I would vote to readjust the taxes.
Yeah, well, that-
Because
yeah,
our
Well, hold
tax
that
code,
thought, that's coming.
but I mean,
We're doing a whole episode on tax reform. Let's not go too far into that one. But yes, you're absolutely right on that one.
But for me, I've always had low paying jobs until I became self employed, which is another low paying job. But I've had several jobs
Just got
where
that.
I've had several jobs where I worked on commission, and those were okay. But I had a couple of jobs where I was getting paid X amount of money, and it was supposedly based on my output and what I made the company. And at one point, I worked for a music repair store, and I was tracking all these things and keeping it track. And I was supposed to be getting somewhere between 30 and 50% of the money I was making in the shop. And so I went for like a 6-month average, and I figured it out that if I was bringing home like $260 a week at that point. This is in the mid 90s, like $260, $300 a week. I figured out the amount of money that I should be making on what they told me I should be making based on what I was making them. I should have been making like $900 a week. And I think that there's a lot of corporations like McDonald's, a lot of the fast food companies, and you see that the fast food workers got together and said, "Hey, screw you, we want more money." I agree with that. And the only reason I say that, and I know everybody's going to yell and scream that those are entry-level jobs. Okay, you're right. Those are entry-level jobs. But when there are no other jobs for people to have, and you have people with master's degrees who have $80,000 in student debt, and they can only get that entry-level job, I'm not saying that we should raise that amount of money to pay them because they're in a certain situation. But I feel like with the increase of general goods and services in America, everything going up and up and up and up and up, but exponentially our income is not going up. Yes, you have the freedom to get a new job. Yes, you have the freedom to re-educate yourself or things like that, but a lot of people don't have that. And I think that if you live in a state where, like in California, what's the minimum rent around here? $1,500 a month?
Too much.
Too much, and you're saying the minimum wage is $11 an hour. I agree that that's a starting point, and I'm never going to argue with anybody who says, well, that's a starting point. That's where you're supposed to start at. But we also have a problem where there's a lot of underemployed people in our country, and that if we don't do something, the rate of minimum wage has to go up with inflation. So I don't agree that it should be an X number, like say $15 an hour. I don't agree with that, but I think it exponentially should go up with inflation. That's
not a bad way to look at it.
That's my argument.
So something else I thought of too when I first heard about it, the first thing I thought of was exactly like Glenn said. Man, if I own a McDonald's I have to pay, and I have to pay these people, my workers, more money, that means I got to charge more money for hamburgers. I mean, how the hell am I going to make up the money?
But let's stop right there for a second. When you're talking about a company like McDonald's,
that's where I was going to go with this.
That's not true.
Okay.
That's not true.
how is it not true?
Because those people are right now, if you look at statistics of major corporations in 2019, they are making exponentially more money than they've ever made in history. The amount of money the average corporation, like a place like McDonald's or a Fortune 500 company, is making.
You're right that they could suffer their profit margins in order to eat that cost of the higher wages, but they're not going to do that.
Well, that's the thing. And
yes.
The problem is, I feel like it's a greed situation.
Oh, absolutely.
But by changing the minimum wage and boosting it, you are not effectively penalizing or redistributing the wealth from those larger companies.
Well, I'm not trying to redistribute the wealth.
Well,
I'm just
by
trying to make
changing the minimum wage, you are costing us more. You are changing the dynamic within our middle class and small business owners.
I agree. I'm a small business owner.
This is seriously detrimental to a small business owner.
I agree.
So,
Now,
but it is not coming back out of these larger corporations.
I think you guys are both right. The thing to think about too, though, is it only affects entities that pay minimum wage. If you were already paying your employees a career-based, amount of work, maybe not flipping burgers, but if they were, I don't know, tradesmen jobs, an entity that owns that operates and has a whole bunch of employees that are tradesmen type people, plumbers, painters, I don't know what, and you weren't paying the minimum wage as it was, maybe you're paying them $18 an hour, $20 an hour. Those are fair wages to live by. So
those are fair wages, but
then it doesn't affect that.
What it does in the same way that job that was considered a respectable middle ground wage.
Okay.
Now the bottom line's being brought up. So that job essentially isn't worth as much as it used to be.
Okay, I agree with that.
I agree with that too. But when I was saying, I'll say real quick too, being a small business owner, and I only employ part-time people here and there because I can't afford to hire anybody, full-time. When I go to hire somebody, no matter what it is in California, if I'm not willing to pay them $15, $16 an hour, nobody wants to work for me. Because why go to work in California for a day and make $60 for an 8-hour day. Nobody would do that. They'd rather just sit at home. So as small businesses, I feel like we are going to have to figure something out. And I'm not saying I have a solution to it, but I do think that your pay rate based on the cost of goods and services, as it's always going up, it has to somehow be on a scale that sort of works with that. You can't, in 2019, it's really hard, especially in California, to hire somebody and go, well, I can pay you $10 an hour. Who are you going to get for $10 an hour? You're going to get an idiot or somebody who just says, yeah, whatever, dude, and never shows up. I mean, if I hire somebody to just do basic sanding or cleaning up around the shop, if I'm not willing to pay them $15 an hour, I can't find anybody.
They can go to In-N-Out and get $15 an hour. And that's
Right.
one of the examples I wanted to use against the McDonald's example is In-N-Out is an extremely profitable company, and they pay their employees way more than minimum wage. When they raise
And they
that,
also offer them insurance and stuff, too.
they offer them all kinds of stuff. So obviously the business model can work and be profitable. I think it goes back to like what Thomas was saying about just general greed, that McDonald's needs to restructure its company.
But I'm with you on the same thing, Glenn, because I mean, I know why you're making these statements. I know where you're coming from, and I'm in the same world. You know, we need people to work with us, but we can't. If I have to pay everybody who sweeps the floor $15 an hour, then now I got to increase my my profit margin, and I got to charge more for services. But I don't know if you've had a TV repaired lately. I charge $80 an hour for my welding services, and if I go to have a TV repaired, it's $150 an hour. And I feel like I've
never had a TV repaired.
I'm at least as skilled as the guy repairing the TV.
I'll just pull open the TV and
Right.
resolder a connection if it's broken.
I know.
Change a
pull the
board
component
out.
Or-
But-
yeah.
each change boards out
but
now.
but we live in a world where people are starting to feel like that's what those things cost. And so if we're raising the price on all our goods and services like that, and people do it, we're going to have to do some sort of restructuring on our pay scale, And I feel like as somebody who does employ people once in a while, that if somebody is worth having around, they're worth paying some sort of wage that keeps them coming back. And that's what I feel like is not going on with a lot of businesses. We're so greedy, like a place like McDonald's. McDonald's makes billions of dollars, not just billions of hamburgers.
They're a filthy example of
And
greed.
I feel like they're one of those companies that, like, it's a teenage, high school job or whatever. But I mean, again, it goes back to we're in a place and time where people with master's degrees can't find jobs.
Yeah.
So they got $80,000 in student debt. I don't know. I'm not saying I have an answer for this again, but I feel like there's got to be some sort of restructuring on how we do all of this.
So do you think government subsidized loans are encouragement for people to be put in the poverty line?
I don't know enough about those to really make a decision and make a statement on that.
Okay, hold on. We may have to revisit this topic, that angle later as a standalone episode. There was another one that I wanted to throw out there, but it should be a little quicker here because we have already dedicated an entire episode to it. But that was universal basic income.
Oh yeah,
That was definitely another approach at eliminating or helping with the poverty level, and again attacked the at the angle of, hey, how do we compensate for inflation for people who are trying to live off of income from jobs that are not necessarily career-based, long-term lines of work.
They're supposed to be starting points for people.
We just need to reinstate the gold standard.
What's the gold standard? Fill me in here.
Predating the Federal Reserve, we had all our money, the U.S. currency, was
In bars of
backed-
gold?
Well, no, it was backed by gold.
Backed by gold.
So every dollar out there had something physical that it
Tangible backing.
right.
Yeah. I don't know if we can do that anymore. I feel like with one of the things that we run into, and this goes back into poverty as well, is with our population increasing all the time. We can't just find a bunch more gold just to compensate the extra money we need in our economy. And we're printing money now that really has no backing.
Right.
And, I don't know if someone told me this years ago, money isn't real. You shouldn't think
It's
of
not.
it. It's
not.
real. And I've always kind of had that belief in money. But when you're poor, it sure is real,
Sure feels real.
right? And when you're getting...
You can't buy bread for the week.
You can't have dinner. You can't... I mean, I went to Denny's last night, and it cost me $38 for two people to have almost nothing
Why would you go to Denny's?
because I was hungry, and it was 12:30 at night.
In and out.
Yeah, the line was really long.
Oh yeah, yeah, right.
Go to Denny's and sit down and be done before the in-and-out line.
Right.
Oh man.
But that goes back to my statement is, I don't want to pay people more money to work for me. I'm totally with you because then I don't make any money. But if you don't pay a decent amount of money to people who are worthy of working for you, you're going to get crap employees. So it's a catch-22 in a lot of ways, and
Yes,
it's an
it is.
argument that you could go in every direction. But I think when it comes back to the poverty thing, there's so few advantages out there. And like I said, when you got people with master's degrees that are applying for jobs at McDonald's because they can't get jobs anywhere else.
Freaking Staples.
Okay, so what about that kid who's 17 years old and sort of living on the streets and kind of with his parents and they're screwed up and he's trying to figure out a way of getting something by in life and all he can get is a $7 an hour job.
You know what? He's 17. He's got the energy to only sleep 3-4 hours a night.
He can do the same thing I did, had 4 jobs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I did.
I'm with you. But if those 4 jobs all pay $7 an hour, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Like I said, I don't have an answer for any of this, but I think we should definitely figure something out because,
You should jump on Craigslist and find a roommate
right?
Man. Craigslist.
or some such.
Oh boy. All right, we're out on that note. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next time. Show notes and other info can be found at our website, greatdistraction.com. The Great Distraction is listed in iTunes, and we greatly appreciate it when our listeners take the time to look us up and leave us a 5-star rating and review. That helps our show grow and motivates us to continue producing content. If you'd like to get in contact with us, you can do so using the email address, greatdistractionpodcast@gmail.com, or via our website. We're always interested in hearing any thoughts, comments, or questions from our listeners. Keeping up on the latest from us can be done in several different ways. You can add us to your favorite RSS feed tracker. The link is available on our website or in iTunes. Or you can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Just search for Great Distraction, one word, no space. As always, thank you for listening, and thank you for all the support.